Hey, friends, and welcome back to another episode of Thriving Thoughts. I'm your host, Dr. Sherri. You guys are in for yet another treat. I met this wonderful woman named Denae, who happens to be the daughter of my friend Dee Bourgoin, who I interviewed for season 3 of the show. I was connected with Denae, and I cannot be more delighted because this episode, she brings to light some beautiful truths about the fact that we can become so emotionally burdened with our own emotional baggage. And it's of our own choosing, believe it or not. Might be subconscious, but it is our own choosing. And suddenly we get to a place where we realize we're out of room and something has to change. Friends, if you're in that space today where you've reached an emotional bottom, where you say, there is no more room, I have no more space, I cannot go on like this, this is the episode for you. So without further delay, here's my conversation with my new friend, Denae. Denae, welcome to the show. I'm so glad to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Sherri.
Absolutely. So for a little backstory for the people that don't know, we had a conversation and it was so funny because I talked to your mom, and I'm going to tell the listeners who your mom is momentarily, but I talked to your mom and she was saying, I have somebody that I want to recommend to you. And she was extolling all of this person's virtues. And she was like, I really think that this would be a great person for you to interview for your show. And then she says, and that person is my daughter. And I was like, oh, that's so sweet. But she didn't want me to think that it was like nepotism. Like she was just recommending you because you were her daughter. Anyway, so your mom is Dee Bourgoin, who I had on the show in season 3, I think. So
yeah,
we're happy to have
my biggest cheerleader. She is just my
I know.
Mom, just love her.
Yeah, no, she's fantastic. So thank you. I'm excited. This is the first time I've ever separately interviewed a mom and then a daughter. So this will be fun for me. And I have no expectations that there will be any similarity because this season is a different theme. And this season we're talking about thriving alone. And so Denae, let's dive in. And let me just ask you, what have you been or are thrive or being alone in a time in your life that you felt alone?
I feel like I have had a lot of times in my life that I have felt alone. I've kind of in my life gone through a lot of things. I'm in my mid-30s and I've had cancer multiple times. I've been divorced twice. I've moved cross country twice. I'm, have been a single mom. I have a teenage daughter. And depression has been something that I have struggled with since I was a teenager with various things. And I think the time in my life I have felt most alone, the end of 2019, I had been, through more relationship stuff and had moved back across the country and was just in a place where even in a room full of people, I just felt like I didn't belong and like I was completely alone. And it was just such a dark place, even though ask anybody around me and I've got a smile and everything looks great. And, it's like, but I would sit there and I'm like, I don't belong here and I don't know these people and I don't know myself. And it was more of I stopped knowing who myself was and I felt so alone in that, just not having any idea what to do with myself really.
So, okay, back us up a little bit. What led up to that?
I think it was I had gone through my second divorce. My daughter had asked, she had moved back across the country. Her dad is here. She has a little sister here. And so she wanted to come here to be a part of her sister's life. And she asked me to come and I opted to come back to a place that is my roots. It's my home, but it wasn't a place that I felt was right for me anymore, but I wanted to be with my daughter, obviously. So I came back to this place and it just was like a very lonely, I just knew it wasn't where I wanted to be, but it was where I wanted to be when she was with me. In the weeks that she was with me, it was the right place, but it's expensive here. And to live here, you had to work harder. And it's like, so I had less time with her. So it like kind of got lost in the, well, what am I really doing here? And who am I when she's not with me? Who am I anymore? I don't really know.
That's so good. So this is really fascinating. I know I'm not the only one thinking it. So you're like, yeah, I'm in my mid 30s. I've had cancer multiple times. But the time I felt most alone is when I moved back to this part of the country. So why, I'm honoring your decision to talk about that. But I know that people are listening or watching, and they're curious, like, why this is lonelier than when she had cancer?
Yeah, I feel like when I was in cancer mode, it's like you don't, that quote that says, you being strong, you're strong because being strong is the only choice you've got. It's like, where else? It's like, you have to go forward. It's like, what else, the first one I was a young teenager. And so I feel like most of that was my parents, and that was their
Okay.
battle and their struggle. I was
Yeah.
it was mine, but it was more theirs, and as I got older, the ones I had, I was pregnant when I had my second one, but it's like, well, what other choice do I have? It's like, it's like you almost have to not process it in order to get through it. And
Got it.
we can talk about that part later, because that's where I have found my journey really started, because I wasn't really processing any of the things that I needed to be processing.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah. So, okay. So you found yourself in this space. And how old was your daughter? This was at the end of 2019.
Yeah. So she's 16 now. So she was, 14, 13, 14.
14. Okay.
Yeah.
And so in those moments where she wasn't with you, I'm assuming she was with her dad.
Yeah.
And so on the weeks that she wasn't with you, what was going on with you when you said, I didn't know who I was? Give us a little, open door, open window into your thought world. What were you thinking? What were some of the thoughts that you had during that time?
I am an artist. I'm a photographer. I also paint. I do a lot of art. And I knew that I wasn't feeling myself when I didn't have any interest. I would sit at home by myself, or I would go out. And whether I was drinking or not, I work graveyard shift. So I would, at 2 a.m, be too lonely to sit at home in an empty house. And I'd go sit and drink a Diet Coke at the bar, because I just didn't want to be alone, even though I felt lonely sitting at the bar full of people too. So it didn't make me feel any better, but it just
Right.
was like, and I didn't want to normally, now I would be painting, I would be drawing, I would be painting, I would be writing, but I lost all of that. I didn't have any interest or any part of, I lost that part of myself, because I feel like I lost all of myself.
So, okay, got it. So you were alone, but it felt better to be alone around other people, even though you still felt alone. Right. I get it.
I know, but
no, but I think what we're going to get to, because that's always, it's a default. I know for me, when I feel alone, or if I'm feeling scared or uncomfortable, I'm like, hey, mom and dad, can I come over? Can I come hang out? Like, I just want to go be around people, and it helps. But the minute that I leave, I'm back in the same headspace.
Exactly.
So was that a similar pattern for you?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly where I was. Exactly. It's like I'd get home and it was almost twice as dark at home.
Yes.
Because it was like I pretended to try to fill it up with something that didn't make me feel better. And then I'd get home and I'm like, man, the house is even more empty than I left it. This was kind of a hard place to be in. Like I said, my shift at work made it harder. I really had an opposite schedule of anybody else around. So it just really was like a lonely kind of time for me.
Yeah. And so when you mentioned earlier, and I want to talk about this because I just talked about this very briefly with my cousin on the last episode, but you mentioned it. And that is, when she was gone, it was like you were gone too, because when she was there, you had a purpose, a function, kind of, right? Like an identity.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us a little bit about that shift, because my guess is that you see yourself a little bit differently right now. But tell us about the shift for you of realizing, not necessarily fixing that, but realizing, wait a second, I feel alone because I don't know who I am, because I've lost myself. Like, was that an epiphany? Did you just realize it?
Well, it's interesting. So the end of 2019, I was at work one night and I was kind of thinking about the following year, and I was thinking about how lonely I felt. I'd been back here now for 2 years, and I was like, I don't feel any better. It's been 2 years and I'm still feel lonely and hate it here. And I'm like, but I don't want to leave. I'm not going to leave her, and I was at work one night and I had this, I was like, I'm going to set my intention for 2020. I'm going to choose my word for the year. And
Okay.
the word heal came to me. And it was interesting because it was like eye-opening, because I was like, wow, like I have all of these things that have happened in my life that people look at me and they say how strong I am and all of these things. And I'm like, and all of these things that I thought that I had processed and healed from. And really, I was just shoving it all inside. And I felt like I was like, I think I've run out of room. I'm like, I have all of this stuff that I've shoved in and it's bursting out because I've run out of room. And I need to heal from all of this stuff in order to change patterns that have gotten me to the places that I am. And in order to feel better, because I said, I lost myself in my first divorce too. And I didn't know who I was. And then I swore I wouldn't do it again. And here I still was, not, back in the same kind of a place, heartbroken and sad and lonely. And I'm like, I need to get all of this out. I need to let it out. I need to process it and heal from it, or I'm never going to be able to be okay. Like, I just won't be okay. I'm like, I'll feel like this forever,
I really love how you described that as running out of room. Because I think that it's a really an accurate picture of what happens, particularly in our minds and our hearts. Like, we can only hold so much.
Yeah.
We can only hold so much weight.
Yeah.
Before we realize that we've got to drop something. But it's not just dropping. I love the fact that your word was heal.
Yeah.
So would you let us into some of those things that you felt like, wait a second, I need to heal from that? What were some of those things for you?
It's funny. I had never gone to counseling. I'd never sought out any kind of counseling or therapy. It was like almost instantly when I set my intention on that word, things started coming to me that were the things that I needed to find. Books that I'd had for years and never read that people gave to me that suddenly were in a box that I opened, and things like that. And it was like, so I sought out counseling. I learned Reiki. The things that I thought that I would have needed to sit down and go to counseling for, like my divorces. I mean, they've come up obviously, but it was more of myself, and it was, parent stuff, which was interesting. I wouldn't have ever thought I needed to talk about my parents in therapy, but it was just the emotional pain of having parents get divorced and the things that did for me, and things that has echoed in relationships. I had a great childhood and my parents were amazing. So it's not that part, but it was like what that really did for me and how that's played into my own marriages and things like that. And it's been it's been interesting.
Well, can we talk about that a little bit? Because I think one of the beautiful truths that you just described is, on this journey of self-discovery, of figuring out who we are, it's not necessarily about the events in our life, or it's always about us. It's always about peeling back the layers of, why am I who I am, and am I who I want to be, and who do I want to be? It's always reflected on the who. And so, but you hit on something that I know, when I was growing up, I was in the minority because most of my friends had parents who were divorced.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
And I didn't really understand. And so now I've got you locked in my podcast room, and now I get to understand, and other people get to understand too. But so what are some of those things? Because it's so common. And I think a lot of times we just, as a society, say that's part of it. Like, it's just, this is life. Let's deal with it. But there's stuff that comes up that carries over into adulthood that you said carries over into your own marriages, your own relationships. So can you tell us a little bit about some of those pieces from that you felt like you had to heal from, and whatever you feel comfortable sharing? And then how some of those things, how you had these insights that some of these things carried over to your adult relationships as well.
I would say the biggest thing that has affected not only my like love relationships, but my work and friend relationships, there's things that happened that I remember, I was young. It was right after I was 14, when this all happened. So it's like, you're a hormonal teenager anyways. I had missed part of my childhood because I had cancer right prior to that. And then my parents get divorced, and it's the, if there had been a little bit more given, like if one of them had tried harder, would it have worked? Would it have, and I didn't realize how much that piece right there has affected who I have become in a give and give and give and give until I have nothing left to give. And then I have to find it somewhere, and I keep giving because in hopes
try harder.
Marriage, in hopes that it'll make my boss happy, and that my friend, it's my friendships, it's my work relationship, it's my parenting, it's my marriages, all of it, give to my own detriment in the hopes that's, in thinking that that's what I need. And it was the realization that I've given until I've had nothing, and I have dug deep and I have found it from somewhere when I'm barely getting by. I'm not giving to myself at all. I'm giving to everyone else, but it's not working. I'm still divorced twice, and I'm still, it's like still have relationships that you lose no matter what you give. And that was a huge realization for me that that's not going to save it. That's not going to fix it. So yourself, give to yourself. You've got to give to yourself, because you're not helping. It's just not going to save any of it. I don't know. It didn't save anything.
100%. Oh my gosh, that's so good. I have just been listening to a book called The Worthiness Project on Audible. Mm-hmm. Check it out. If you're an Audible member, it's like one of the freebies okay. And anyway, she talks about, she puts worthiness and value, in a couple of different terms, but she uses a lot of money terms. And what I love, one of the things that she described was, how when you go to buy something, like at the store, or buy a new, whatever's important to you, buy a new item, a new technology item, a new outfit, whatever it is, you say, can I afford this? At least, hopefully, you ask, can I afford this? Right? Because if you put a value on what you have and you cherish what you have, if you're down to your last $20, you're probably not going to spend your last $20 on tacos, right? Like, you're going to, what's that?
I might.
I might too. But here's the thing. It's the same thing with emotional expenditure. For us to ask ourselves, can I afford to give of myself right now? Do I have a reservoir? Am I running on limited supply? And all of that requires us to be intimately familiar with who we are, to do this peeling back of the layers and knowing about ourselves. And so that's the work that you've been doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's been intense. It's been but so rewarding. I've been going to counseling now for a little bit over a year, almost every week. I mean, I go regularly. Like I said, I do Reiki, and it's so interesting because I know in those dark times, everybody wants to say, think positive and have all these positive thoughts. And it's like, you can't do that when you're in the dark like that. But
Right.
once I started digging through and healing. There's so many things that I've been able to process and let go of and heal. And it doesn't mean they don't hurt all the time, but reprocess my mind too about how, when I think about them, how my body is reacting to them, and it's like, I've just, now that you get some of that out of the way, when I think positively, it's like, oh, I can actually believe it. Because when you're in the dark like that, you don't, but it's like, I've made room for stuff. And it's like, I feel so much lighter having processed, I've had, like my parents' divorce and things that have come with that. I lost a friend really tragically right after my daughter was born, so many things that have really affected my adult life that still affect me and make me sad, but are not, I don't have a physical, visceral reaction to what they feel like when I think about them. I just, I don't feel that gut punch in myself.
So let me ask you this. You said giving doesn't heal anything. So what does? You've made room for some new ideas. So for you and your relationships, if that's not going to do it, it's not going to cut it. What is going to cut it? What are you making room for?
Making room for myself, which has been something I've never really, really done. And giving, it probably does. Obviously, it has a component. It's important. It's who I am. It's what I'm in healthcare. It's what I do. But it's interesting how much really starting to take care of myself has brought to me the situations and the people and the things that are right for me, and also how much less tolerant I've become of the things that aren't. I've let myself be walked all over. I've let myself be lied to and betrayed and things like that. And how much self-worth has come with making room and processing and taking the blame off of myself for a lot of things that have happened, forgiving myself and realizing, letting myself be angry, releasing myself of blame. There's a lot of movement in anger. I can go a lot of places from that emotion, to joy. It's really, I've really learned a lot, and I'm way less tolerant of people walking all over me. And I've learned to set boundaries, which is, to me, I would have thought before, I know that it would have been like, I'm so afraid of someone walking away because I'm standing up for myself. But now it's not. It's attracting the people who are supposed to stay, and the people who aren't, that's fine. You stay on the other side. I don't want you here. You can stay out there.
It's such a beautiful truth that when we, boundaries are never something that we learn how to do. They're a natural byproduct of knowing our value and our worth. So like when you were saying that, it's basically like you have taken all of the junk, maybe not all of it, because I know I haven't taken all of my junk, but you have taken the junk, right? That's cluttering up the space that allows you to know who you are and love who you are. And you've taken that and you've said, no, that's got to go. But in doing that, when you're making space, you're making room for the right things, which is what you can control, which is your worth and your value. When you make space for that, then your brain is physically attuned to that. So it's only natural that you're going to be attracted to the people who confirm what you believe about yourself, right? Yeah. You're going to be attracted to the people who aren't going to try to suck you dry. Conversely, on the other hand, when we're cluttered with all of that other stuff that says, I'm not worthy, I have to break my back to make sure somebody doesn't walk away, then those are the people we're going to attract into our lives.
Exactly. Yeah. And, having negative thought forms has been a huge thing that I didn't really realize how much I knew there's self-doubt and things in there, and how much letting go of some of those negative thought forms. It's interesting how it has just opened up so many things. I mean, it's just, and and the people that have come and the relationships that I've had, but how much better they've gotten because I've set boundaries for myself, but because of the energy that I'm putting out. Yeah. It's rippling out too. And like, I'm seeing it in their lives in ways too. It's like, been such an interesting, the last year and a half has been a really, really hugely transformational year in so many things. It's been pretty incredible.
So what do you think, why late 2019? Like what was the, you know, was it literally just this epiphany while you were at work of the word heal? Was that what set all of this into motion for you? Or can you put your finger on anything else that was just like, enough is enough?
I had gone through some more relationship stuff and it was like just another, I just can't do this anymore. I just can't. Why
Yeah.
are the same things happening to me? And I was just like, man, I'm just tired of being sad and just tired of being lied to and tired of being, hurt. And I just was like, I've got to somehow break this cycle and figure out why these patterns keep repeating in my life. And I've got to heal all of this stuff that has gotten me right here, because I don't want, I'm like, I don't want to do this. In 5 years, I don't want to be thinking, oh my gosh, well, here I am again. I've done it again. I'm in the same, I'm like, I don't, I'm like, I'm already sad and tired. And I'm like, I'm like, nope, it's time to go a different direction.
It's really fascinating that you say that, because a lot of times people think that they're ready to make room to heal. But they haven't reached that place of, I'm so over feeling this way. I am so over the detrimental effects of my choices, my habits, my tendencies, my whatever, my needs. I'm so over that I have reached my self bottom.
Yeah.
There's got to be something better than this. And a lot of times people get discouraged because they think they're ready, but then they keep kind of going back into old patterns. And so I want to ask you about that. But here's what I say to people is that, the brain never forgets habits. It never forgets. We can make new ones.
Mm-hmm.
And the new ones become more readily accessible than the old ones, but the old ones are still there. And so from time to time, they're going to emerge. So let me ask you this. In the last, you said it's been 16, 17 months, something like that. Have there been times when the old parts have reemerged in some way?
Yeah. The giving, there are still times where I find myself giving more than I have inside. I mean, that's been a really hard thing. I mean, I'm drastically in a different place than I was, but it definitely is still hard, especially in areas where I'm like, I'm a fixer too. Like, so so it's like, okay, so I'm being really good and really strong. And then I'm like, no, I can't just let you flounder. I can't, even if it's not right or good for me, I can't just sit by and watch, even though, it's like it's really been a difficult thing, but
I would say you can sit by and watch somebody flounder.
Yes, I can.
Right. So sometimes we lie to ourselves and we're like, I can't do that. Yeah. Well, you can. You don't want to. It makes you feel right. It makes you feel uncomfortable, but yeah. So what would you say in your growth journey? Because it's no fun. I know from personal experience, it's no fun, and yet it's loads of fun. It's no fun to understand and peel back those layers and dig around in the clutter and pull out the stuff, because sometimes we pull out stuff that's like, oh, I can't believe that's there. I don't like that there. I got to work through that. And sometimes we find treasures, right? Like, oh, that's good. That's worth holding on to, like that, you can go, but this, yes, I'm going to hold on. And that's the way we learn about ourselves, is through that growth, is the digging and the decluttering. And so I would ask you, what do you feel like maybe are one thing that you learned about yourself that perhaps you'd never put a name to or spoken aloud or realized was in you that you knew that's got to go. That's one. And then number two, what's one thing that you learned about yourself that you feel either surprised by or comforted by or are now fully convinced of, whereas before maybe you were only partially convinced of?
Oh gosh, that's a hard one. Oh gosh, this is a hard one.
It's okay.
I think that a huge thing, insecurity for me and the way that I speak to myself has drastically changed and speak about myself. I've worked really, really hard, and I didn't realize until I started digging through, and I've got notebooks. I always take a notebook to counseling with me. And it's like I try to write down the things that are important and the things that I'm feeling right then. And it's interesting how many times I was told, you need to stop talking to yourself like that or about yourself. Stop putting that out there. Stop saying those things. You are not gross. You are not pathetic. You are not disgusting. You are not, it's interesting how
so good.
Changing those has really, and it's not always easy. Obviously there's times that I'm like, oh man, but it really, really challenging myself to be kinder to myself has changed what I see when I look in the mirror, even though outwardly I haven't changed on the outside, but it has changed drastically what I see when I look at myself, because I'm proud of where I stand. I'm proud of what I've been through too. I really, in the processing journey and digging through it, I'm like, man, you have really gone through some tough crap. And here you are, and you're still standing here and you have this incredible daughter it's like all of these things that I have accomplished and done for myself, in myself. It's like, man, you've been so mean to yourself all this time. And I think a huge part of that was I didn't realize how many of the things, even like in a husband's infidelity, how much blame I put on myself. And that was a surprising thing in so many things, how much blame I put on myself that were things that had absolutely nothing to do with me.
Yes.
And that was pretty surprising. I just was like, so I've been carrying this all around because I've blamed myself for it.
Yep.
And it's like, okay, now we need to get that out of there.
Yeah. No, that's such a good answer, and all wrapped up in a package, because it's the fact that you've been self-blaming is the discovery. Yeah. And then the other realization out of that is that's not my fault. Other people's stuff isn't my fault. And look at me. I'm pretty amazing. Yeah. I think that's a really beautiful benefit of doing the deep dive into self-knowledge, I guess would be the right word. Just knowing ourselves, knowing who we are, knowing who we're not, and knowing who we want to be. So as we close out today, a couple of questions for you, Denae. How much longer do you plan on being in counseling?
Well, I'm leaving the country soon. I had a crazy thing, but we already have spoken about, I'm like, okay, once a month we're doing a Zoom session. I'm like, I'll cry when I have to leave her. She has like drastically changed my life as a person. I just am so thankful that I found her. She was recommended by a friend, and I'm like, I can't imagine all of these years I've been wasting all of this time that I could have, and it's not wasted. It came.
That's right.
Supposed to. She came because I don't know that it would have been the right person before then, but I don't see myself letting go of her anytime soon. Yeah. She's stuck with me forever.
And I love that. And that's why I tell people like, hey, like people that I coach and stuff, I'm like, hey, if you want to work with me, I'll work with you until I die. Because this work, this self-knowing, it is work.
Yeah.
And it's forever work. It's not, I know myself, I'm good to go. It's forever work. And so that's the reason I asked you that, because I think that it's important for people to hear that this isn't something that you overcome.
Yeah, no.
Or, right? The end doesn't come until we're no longer here. Like that's when the end comes.
Your car needs oil changes till the very end. It's the maintenance that keeps your car going.
That's right.
The value in that has just been huge. It's just,
yeah.
So she's stuck with me once a month at least until she
love it.
leaves.
I love it. Okay, one more question for you. So because you've shared so many profound truths with us, I really love this idea of healing, that you were out of room. But maybe you have something additional that you'd like to say. I ask every guest at the end of the episode, and because the season is about thriving alone, what is one truth that you would like to share with the people listening and watching about thriving alone?
I think there is so much in the power of your thoughts towards yourself and how much you're open to accepting and changing. And when you start accepting and seeing the little abundances around you, it just keeps coming. I mean, my life has just had huge changes, and I know it's been so much of the power of thought and the power of making room to be open. I could have said I was open 5 years ago, but I wasn't open because there wasn't room. And now that I've made room for things, the things that are coming into my life are just huge. I mean, just life-changing.
I know you were blessed and encouraged by that conversation with Denae. I just love this concept of being out of room, but not just being out of room for the negative stuff, for the baggage, for the hurt, for the aches, but making room, decluttering, making room to value yourself, to value you, to know your worth, to protect it, and to guard it. When we change that focus, clear out the emotional clutter, and invite in an emotional refreshing, an emotional makeover, we make room for that. We make room for our realities, our relationships, our actualities to be different, to be more beneficial to us and to those around us. If you've enjoyed today's episode, will you please write us a review on Apple Podcasts and rate the show 5 stars? Don't forget that I have my Thriving Thoughts texting community. All you need to do to join is text the word thrive to 540-369-2139. We'll be back here this Friday with the second in my series on redeeming the time. Until then, friends, please do remember to speak truth over the lies, and you will thrive in any and every circumstance.